A new report names directed radio frequency as the likely cause of illnesses among American diplomats in Cuba and China. That's based on findings from a National Academy of Sciences committee.
A long-awaited U.S. government report released over the weekend said the most plausible explanation for the mysterious symptoms experienced by American diplomats in U.S. embassies in Havana, Cuba, and other countries were, quote, consistent with a directed radio frequency energy attack. That's according to a government-commissioned report by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine released on Saturday, which marks the first time Washington has officially offered an explanation for what's come to be known as Havana syndrome, though it's still inconclusive.
We continue to try and determine precisely the causation of this.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in October that significant U.S. government resources had been dedicated to solving the mystery, in which more than 40 U.S. government employees were affected between 2016 and into 2018. Diplomats in some postings in Cuba and other countries were plagued with nausea, headaches, dizziness, and other unexplained symptoms. Havana syndrome has long been the subject of intense speculation, given the nature of the symptoms, the location of the postings, and the silence of the U.S. government. The State Department said in June 2018 that it brought home diplomats who were stationed in China over concern they were suffering similar symptoms.
The Trump administration has ended 5 cultural exchange programs with China. The government says the programs were used to push Chinese communist propaganda and held no benefit to the United States. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the exchange programs he ended were fully paid for and operated by the Chinese regime. He says they were actually soft power propaganda tools. The terminated programs include the Policymakers Educational China Trip Program, the U.S.-China Friendship Program, the U.S.-China Leadership Exchange Program, the U.S.-China Trans-Pacific Exchange Program, and the Hong Kong Educational and Cultural Program. Each program allowed U.S. officials to travel in China at Beijing's expense. Pompeo says mutually beneficial exchange programs will continue. Advocates for the human rights met with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo recently. They discussed the threat to the Chinese Communist Party poses to people of different regions and ethnicities. An effort to bring more awareness to the nation's CCP is enslaving through its Belt and Road Initiative. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
Members of the Captive Nations Coalition met with Secretary of State Pompeo in D.C. The human rights advocates called on the U.S. government to designate the Chinese Communist Party a transnational criminal organization. That's in part because the CCP is allegedly reaping the organs from living prisoners of conscience, according to an international tribunal. A person who practices the spiritual discipline Falun Dafa said he's grateful to Pompeo for being the first secretary to condemn the CCP's persecution of the faith.
So I express deep gratitude for that, and also I emphasizing in the past more than 10 years, Falun Gong practitioners have been focusing on exposing the CCP's crime of organ harvesting, live organ harvestings. So he fully aware about these issues, and he also emphasizing that Department of State is working on this issue, and Assistant Secretary Robert Destro actually have a team working on this issue as well.